Welcome everybody to Go Local Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder. It is Friday. It is a beautiful day. John Giorsi gives it a 10 on the Giorsi factor, but we're headed down to Charlottesville. We've got the chair of the Political Science Department, the University of Virginia, Professor Lawless. Thanks so much for joining us.
Sure.
Okay, big week for the Dems. Let's go through it. What were the highlights and what were some of the missed opportunities?
I think the convention went as well as it possibly could have gone. The highlights were Michelle Obama and Barack Obama's speeches for sure. And then last night, Kamala Harris delivering a crisp but very direct argument for why she should be president of the United States. The excitement in the convention hall was palpable, and I think the roll call was one of the most fun experiences that delegates have probably ever had.
Walz's speech seemed to break out for, I think, a lot of people in that what didn't feel like this new Progressive Party Democratic speech. It seemed like a Middle America kind of speech. Talk about the importance of Walz's speech.
It's really interesting because the substance of Walz's speech and the substance of Harris's speech were not at all different. And frankly, they weren't that different from the Obamas or the Clintons. But Tim Walz is perceived as and embodies the persona of a guy from Middle America. And so when he says the same thing, it just carries a different kind of sentiment. And I think that what Tim Walz had to do and what he did was let especially white men in the middle of the country know that Kamala Harris was not going to bring in an agenda that was totally counter to everything that they believed in, that she understands working class Americans, that he wouldn't be on this ticket if she didn't, and that his vision for the future is totally consistent with Harris's vision for the future. So it highlighted, I think, both in delivery and substance, why he was probably the best pick she could ever have chosen.
But being a former high school lacrosse coach and seeing him give a high school football coach and having played high school football, it was just a great delivery. It was normal, it was American, it was apple pie.
It completely was. It sort of set us down the path of the patriotism theme we saw the next night with all of the people waving the American flags. And the other thing that was really nice about Tim Walz's speech was you felt like you were part of the team and he was revving you up to win, right? So he has experience doing that with a group of 30 or 40 men. He did it to an entire nation and thousands of people in the convention hall. And it was just authentic and it was real, and he has experience conveying that kind of message, and it was just a very feel-good kind of night.
Jump over to last night. I think she exceeded everyone's expectations. An A- kind of speech, maybe an A. I think the critique was not enough on inflation and not enough of a connection to that very same Middle America that Walz hit upon by not addressing some inflationary issues.
I think it was an A speech. There were a couple of things she had to do, and there were things that she had to do that none of her surrogates up until her speech had done or could do. And so it seems to me that she allowed Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and Tim Walz in a lot of ways to talk about the economy. And she gave a very, very powerful discussion of foreign policy and what was going on in the Middle East. And that was something that had pretty much been absent from the convention hall. So I'm sure it was a deliberate decision on the part of the campaign to divvy those things up. Walz is seen as quite credible when it comes to working class issues. She has to demonstrate that she has the strength to be commander in chief. She also chose to deliver a 38-minute speech, which was an interesting choice. I think it was crisp, it was clear, it was short, it was what people wanted. It was shorter than several of the other speeches we had seen throughout the week. She could have covered everything and delivered an hour-long speech. But again, I think that was a decision that the campaign made. They just wanted to end on a very strong, positive, upbeat note.
Yeah, I mean, a major slate to Rhode Island. James Taylor now lives on Jamestown. He was cut out on Monday night. Another, I think, faux pas was Joe Biden going on so late. I do think it was a mistake. I don't know what it added to the program. I understand that their historical benefit, but the Clintons, I think, were as much of a negative as they were a positive. in the broader scope of things, and took away about this sort of joyfulness, energy, positiveness, the future.
Well, can I just say one thing about Hillary Clinton? The fact that Hillary Clinton spoke on Monday night with Joe Biden makes a lot of sense, and her message made a lot of sense. She has already broken the glass ceiling in terms of becoming the nominee, and she was now passing the torch for Kamala Harris to take it a step further, similar to the way that Joe Biden has already been president, and he was passing the torch. So I think Clinton's speech was incredibly powerful. And it belonged on Monday night because it was about the past and about accomplishments that had been achieved, and now we were turning the page. As far as Bill Clinton is concerned, I think he also, similar to Tim Walz, but a different generation, has an ability to connect with middle America and working class voters. He did go on too long.
Yeah, it was brutal. It was just brutal.
Disagree, respectfully disagree.
Yeah. Yeah, not a winner. Don Lemon shortly around 8 p.m. claimed that Beyonce, Taylor Swift were going to make appearances. DMZ was all in at about 8 o'clock, claiming that Beyonce was in the house. Now, listen, not that TMZ or Don Lemon are my go-to, but what happened with Taylor Swift and Beyonce?
You know, I think the problem actually was Oprah. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but you know, they had this Oprah surprise Wednesday night, and so the expectation was, well, they were going to have to top Oprah on Thursday night, and the only two people that would top Oprah would be Beyonce or Taylor Swift. And because they leaked the Oprah information so late, there was this expectation that they would do the same thing for Beyonce and Taylor Swift. So I don't know that anything went wrong or that things didn't work out. I think people were hoping and looking for this. The reports of the motorcade that were Beyonce's turned out to actually be Harris's motorcade. So I don't blame the campaign for that. I also wouldn't be surprised if, in a way to maintain momentum and excitement, we see high-profile events and endorsements by Beyonce and Taylor Swift over the course of the next 74 days.
Yeah, I think it would have been a huge mistake to have had either or both of them at the event. As exciting as it might have been, this was Harris's night. She delivered a great speech. It was well done. It hit on a lot of important things. And it had some key messages in there, which I haven't seen a lot of analysis of, but she set up for the last 70 days, which is this issue of immigration. And she's created now a pathway to really take on Donald Trump by saying, if you give me the bipartisan bill back again, I will sign it. And that bill was primarily written by conservative, Midwestern, Republican senators.
Yes. And when we say conservative, like James Langford from Oklahoma is really, really conservative.
Right,
so
right.
This was the bill that Donald Trump basically
killed.
Got his Republican colleagues to kill because it would give Joe Biden an advantage in the election. So yeah. I don't know if she'll fully be able to neutralize the issue. Trump still has an advantage when it comes to immigration, but she's got a very, very clear message and a very, very clear promise. The other message that I thought came through really well was her line when she said, in a lot of ways, he's not a serious person, right, but his policies and the implications would be very serious for our country. Yeah, and so I think that's going to be what we see. She's not going to engage him in a tit for tat every time he condemns her or criticizes her. She's basically dismissing him as not a serious person. She's going to focus on the substance so that she is basically making the case that it's too dangerous and too backward looking to give Donald Trump a second term.
Yeah, and just in to complete sort of the week's discussion, he had a terrible, terrible week, all over the place, lack of messaging, and seemed very, very confused. But let's go to the next issue.
Well, I'd also like to note that his live posting, his live truth socialing during her speech last night, it reminded me of what happened at the fourth night of the Republican convention, when he just went off script and couldn't stay disciplined and lost it. And that's what we saw last night. In the middle of Kamala Harris's speech, instead of writing about the economy or posting about immigration, he posted in all caps, "Where is Hunter?" Joe Biden is not running for president.
Let's go over to a problem, though, for Harris, which is it is expected today that Robert Kennedy, who was running a far, far distant third in the presidential polling, is going to drop out of the race. Many of those voters are much more likely to shift back to Trump and into the Republican column. And in some swing states, his support, especially among sort of those that will shift back to Trump, is the difference between Harris winning those swing states and losing those swing states. Gives us some analysis, and then how does Harris rebut this?
I think there's a big difference in terms of the potential effect if RFK just drops out versus if RFK drops out and endorses Donald Trump. Um, there's speculation that he will. There's also speculation that Cheryl Hines, his wife, has said, no, you should not do this, and he won't. If he does not endorse Donald Trump, then a large portion of those voters will go to other third-party candidates. Harris has probably already peeled off those who were voting for RFK because they didn't like Biden or Trump. Yeah. So it's not like she has much to gain from RFK dropping out. But a lack of an endorsement could mean that the other third-party candidates pick up most of that support, and the dynamics of the race don't change that much. An endorsement, as you know, could be a way for Donald Trump to pick up some of those voters, which simply means that the Harris campaign is going to have to do everything they possibly can in the swing states to appeal not only to independents, but also to these disaffected Republicans who had sort of gone over to RFK.
Okay, so let's go to, it's been 4 weeks and 6 days, I think, or 7 days, 6 days since Joe Biden dropped out. Harris has had the most effective, successful 34 days maybe in political history, but there's always twists and turns, right? There's economic news, natural disaster, war brewing in multiple locations around the world, and those that we can't even contemplate, like our super yacht flipping over because of a weather event. I mean, you know, the world is dynamic. How does Harris keep this momentum going for the next 70 days?
She's got to do a few things. The first is she has to continue to roll out high-profile people who will speak on her behalf. So some of that is the sexy kind of event like an endorsement by Taylor Swift or Beyonce. But some of it is other high-profile Republicans, people like Adam Kinzinger or Jeff Duncan at the convention saying, look, we're not giving up our Republican Party status, but the stakes are too high. You've got to vote Democrat this election. So that's part of it, to maintain the excitement not only of the base, but to continue to cultivate support among swing voters as well as disaffected Republicans. The other thing is she needs to have a hit it out of the park debate performance. That will likely happen, although the expectations for her are so high that I don't know if it's literally possible to meet them. And then the other thing that she's got to do is channel every single person who developed enthusiasm and energy over the course of the last 34 days and make sure that they're now working for the campaign, whether that's knocking on doors or sending postcards or volunteering in local offices to get people registered to vote. Early voting starts very, very soon. So she can't drop the ball at all, but I'd rather be her than Donald Trump right now.
Expectation on the debate, I'm going to push back a little bit on that. He's helping her out a great deal by calling her stupid, that she doesn't know issues, that she's intellectually not his equal. Doesn't she really just need to sort of draw even, not act like a crazy person, not get shrill, not laugh, but just look like she did last night, in control, presidential?
Under ordinary circumstances, I would say yes, except that no one thinks she's unintelligent or not a serious person other than Donald Trump.
Right.
No one thinks that when Donald Trump said, you know, she's even lower IQ than Joe Biden and he's no fan of Joe Biden's brain, that fell flat because Kamala Harris has never been perceived that way. She's not Sarah Palin. And right. That has never been the stereotype that people have associated with her. And so although Donald Trump lowering the expectations for her because he's suggested that she's not capable of even walking out onto that debate stage and knowing where she is, I don't think is going to resonate. That said, on the counter to that is that everybody has talked about her prosecutorial experience. Everybody has talked about how she's a shark in the courtroom. Everybody has talked about the way that she successfully grilled various witnesses in front of the Judiciary Committee. So Donald Trump's criticisms seem to fall flat on that front, and her supporters' expectations seem to be quite high. So it's tricky. I assume, though, that she'll wipe the floor with him.
Okay, so where does she go next, and where does Trump go next? Or are Republicans to the point of we can't discipline them, we don't even know what to do with them anymore?
Yeah, I think the Republican strategy has to be a despite Trump strategy. Their
Hmm.
surrogates have done an excellent job, and J.D. Vance has done a pretty good job staying on message and trying to highlight, especially issues regarding the economy and immigration. And when they do that, they're on much firmer footing than when Donald Trump decides to talk about and criticize whatever the flavor of the day is. So I think their campaign has to assume that he cannot be disciplined, that he will not be disciplined, and they need to work around him. The other thing that I should note is that it's unclear that there are that many more Republicans or Democrats who are ready to be energized. The Republicans did an excellent job unifying the party and presenting a unified front at their convention. The Democrats, by having Harris as their nominee, have done the same thing. And so now it's just about making sure that those people stay energized and turning to the battleground states. So every time Donald Trump tries to throw more red meat to his base, it's unclear that there's much bang for his buck.
Could we see a prominent Republican, a George W. Bush, step forward and say, this is about the United States of America, this is the most important vote? I've never asked anyone to ever vote for a Democrat. I don't even always approve of the policies they're proposing, but this is about the future of our country. Could that
So
take
I
place?
thought he was going to be the special guest last night because last night was Adam Kinzinger, I thought, setting that up. I was
Yeah.
wrong, which is rare. I'm never wrong.
No,
Um,
almost never.
Almost never, almost never. But yes, and so I do think that a prominent Republican like George W. Bush, even somebody like Mitt Romney or Paul Ryan, who had been central to the Republican Party building itself, would go a long way. And by a long way, I mean you only need to go this far, right? Like
Right.
the bases are basically equal. It's just about converting a handful of people, a few thousand votes here and there, or giving independents or swing voters permission to vote Democrat, even though that doesn't mean that they become Democrats. And I think that would go a long way. I'm not holding my breath.
Okay, let's go to the map for a second. Looking more and more, it's unlikely unless there's an absolute, floodwaters sweeping across the country that places like Florida are going to flip, or maybe even North Carolina. But let's go to a state that is absolutely central to both the Democrats and the Republicans' victory, which is Pennsylvania. And right now, in a number of polls, Donald Trump continues to lead Harris by 1 or 2 points. They're all within the margin of error. How does she ensure that Pennsylvania goes blue?
Three things. First is Josh Shapiro is an excellent surrogate, and he is going to be spending, I assume, almost all of his time in his own state for the next 74 days. Second, she needs to continue to do what she has been doing, to not spend her campaign time in Pittsburgh or in Philadelphia. She's already won Pittsburgh and Philadelphia,
Right.
but to go to those suburbs and to go to those rural areas where Democratic candidates traditionally don't go. And third, this is how she can deploy and use Joe Biden more effectively than anywhere else on the campaign trail. Pennsylvania loves Joe Biden. Joe Biden loves Pennsylvania. And he is effective and won in areas of Pennsylvania in 2020 that other Democrats have not. So I would just send Joe Biden to Pennsylvania for 74 days, and that's the best that the Democrats can do.
I think I heard that he has some connection to Scranton, Pennsylvania. I'm not
Have you
sure
heard
about
that?
Yeah, I think I've heard that. How, we saw a very disciplined Republican convention. It was very positive till the last hour of Donald Trump's speech, but overall it was a positive event. The Democrats, I think for the most part, Democrats are giddy about how successful it is. I take it down a notch. I do think there was some missed opportunities during the week, but I think overall they defined Harris as presidential, which was the most critical element of the entire week. But now it changes. It's on the road. It's leaked documents. It's some case she prosecuted in California a gazillion years ago. How does this thing just break out over the next few weeks?
I think that the one message that the Harris campaign is going to keep hammering home is that the Democratic Party and voting for Kamala Harris is a party that's open to all Americans. And we heard that over the course of 4 days. There's no issue litmus test that makes you a Democrat. In fact, I saw photos of people holding signs outside the convention, not protesting, supporting the convention, saying pro-life and progressive. right? So that this is a big tent party, especially in this election year. There is no one way to be an American. And that's a clear counter to the message that Hulk Hogan was charged to deliver at the Republican convention, which is a very clear statement of what it means to be a real American. And so, to the extent that she can make people feel included, to the extent that she can sort of marshal the excitement that people had in 2008 about Barack Obama and how that just looked like a different vision for the future, she'll succeed. It's a really, really tough call, though. Obama was the only candidate in modern political history who was able to do it. And then he wasn't able to govern like that.
Right.
And so, it's a tricky message to deliver, but I think that's going to be what she has to do over the course of the next 74 days. And that's got to be what Donald Trump pushes back on. The problem is that pushing back on that means alienating and isolating a lot of voters, especially voters of color, women, and he needs to do better among those groups than he did in 2020 if he wants to win.
Jennifer Lawless, Chair of the Political Science Department at the University of Virginia. As always, thank you very much. For everybody else, stay tuned. A lot's going on. Jerome Powell this morning pretty much said we got a rate cut coming in September. Don't know if it's going to be 25 basis points or 50 basis points, but we are on the beginning of a number of rate cuts in all likelihood. September, and then I think most people think another one's coming in December. We've got updates throughout the day. Enjoy this tremendous weather and stay tuned for much more from GoLocal. Thanks, everybody.